Supply-demand lies. Price explodes on crowd buys and short-stop fuel. Here's the hook you keep dodging. Price doesn't lift because a neat curve slides to the right. Price lifts because pain turns into buy orders, and the tape chews through that pain like breakfast. You memorize the classroom chant: demand up, price up, supply up, price down, and you repeat it while the market slaps you during a pump. No worries. I'm not here to hold hands. I'm here to rub your nose in the blind spot you've been polishing like a trophy. You point at a rally and say, demand increased. You want that to sound intelligent, even surgical. What actually happened is uglier and far more real. Aggressive buyers stepped over the spread and hit whatever stood in their way. That is the crowd's direct shove. Not a theory. Not a seminar slide. Just marketable buys smashing resting offers until there's nothing left at those levels. The tick jumps when someone decides to pay up again and again, and the path of least resistance tilts higher while you stand there debating definitions. But there's a second engine baked into your own sentence that you gloss over because it tastes like crow. Shorts who decided price was too high get cut and flip into buyers. That's forced demand. And it is the gasoline textbook. Curves never diagram honestly. A short with a stop above the swing is carrying a loaded buy order, whether the ego agrees or not. Price taps that pocket. The platform translates conviction into a market buy, and the move inhales fresh oxygen. One trigger calls the next. Liquidity thins. Slippage widens. The candle stretches, and your screen prints fills that feel like punishment. Because they are. You cling to supply increased, so price should fall. Cute. Which supply are you married to the passive sell wall that looks heavy until it gets touched and evaporates? Or the real sellers who actually let themselves get hit? The book bluffs? Offers cancel. Size spoofs. What you label more supply often collapses the second real pressure arrives. Meanwhile, your too high sermon corrals shorts into the same tight stop zones, building a ladder of compulsory buys right above the obvious highs. Price climbs that ladder rung by rung, and your certainty is the lumber. Another blind spot. You separated buyers from sellers as if they're different species. During a squeeze, they're the same animal wearing different masks. The chaser clicks buy because fear of missing out burns hotter than caution. The short clicks buy because the broker forces panic into execution. Both print as demand. One is voluntary fuel. One is compulsory fuel. And the tape doesn't care which barrel it drinks from. It just drinks. And it keeps drinking until the last easy barrel is drained. You treat expensive like analysis. It isn't. It's an anchor welded to your wrist. The crowd whispers, too high, piles into shorts, clusters stops together, and gifts the market a clean, mappable pool of liquidity. Price doesn't need your agreement. It needs that pool. When the pool gets raided, you delay cutting your losses hard because pride hates the taste of reversal. That delay is more fuel. The breakout doesn't ask for permission. It hunts unsecured barrels of gasoline and lights them in sequence while you swear the fire isn't real. So yes, price rises on direct buying. And yes, it surges when shorts get shredded because too high felt smart. The part you sanitize is that both flows show up as demand in the print. Your classroom split between demand and supply dissolves the moment, exits morph into entries. You cradle the cartoon because it's comforting, because it lets you pretend the move shouldn't exist. The tape only speaks in executed orders. Crowd buys say go. Short liquidations scream go louder. And while you argue with a diagram, the candle writes your apology letter in real time. If that sounds harsh, good. Gentle didn't wake you. The market doesn't punish ignorance. It punishes stubborn stories that refuse to update when the truth bleeds through the candles. So stare at the belief you walked in with demand up. Price up, supply up, price down. And ask the question you keep choking on as the wick stretches and your chest tightens. When your conviction becomes the catalyst, what do you think the next tick does? From there, stop pretending. A squeeze is magic. It is arithmetic, written in orders you fed into the system yourself. You typed too high. You built a stop. And you parked it where everyone else parked it because comfort loves company. That cluster is not a secret. It is a beacon. When price noses into that band, every proud stance becomes a cued buy, and the tape does not blink before converting bravado into fuel. You thought the market would respect your line? The market respected your liquidity. You also smoothed reality into curves because curves do not shout back. Demand increases. Price increases sounds clean until you trace the path. There is a sequence where buyers accept worse prices on purpose. That is aggression. That is the crowd stepping forward, not a cloud of theory drifting to the right. Then the chain reaction starts. Shorts snap. Limits pull. Gaps appear. The candle extends. You told yourself, rising price proves demand rose. The sting is uglier. Rising price is the footprint of buyers paying up and shorts being dragged up, both printing as demand while your neat diagram dies quietly in the corner. Now look at the mirror line in your own summary. When supply increases, price should fall. Cute. In practice, what you call supply is often a stack of offers that vanish the second they are touched. That is not supply. That is noise dressed as weight. Real supply is a seller willing to be hit and willing to stay hit. If they cancel, your textbook collapses. Meanwhile, the crowd's buys are not theoretical. They cross the spread in print. Screens do not pay you for opinions about abundance. They pay you for recognizing which side is actually executing and which side is bluffing with cancel buttons half pressed. You also ignored time. These surges do not climb forever. They climb until the easy barrels run dry. The obvious stops clear. The late chasers tire, and the move breathes. But here is the part that keeps scarring your equity curve. The ceiling is rarely where you first shouted too high. The crowd shouts early, stacks early, and gets squeezed early. That distance between first arrogance and first capitulation is the tuition you keep paying because you want the world to trade on your adjectives. Expensive is not an argument. Executed buys are an argument. Forced buys are an argument. The tape listens to those. There is another blindfold inside your text. You treated the two engines as separate eras, direct buying over here, short covering over there. In reality, they braid. The crowd buys. Price ticks. Shorts flinch. Stops convert. Price jumps. New buyers chase. Resting offers pull. Shorts who added for pride see, risk, snap. And the next pocket blows. It is one wave with alternating sources of thrust, not two chapters. You split the move into classroom halves because halves are easier to reason with. The tape prefers loops that feed themselves until something breaks. Hear the part that hurts. Your disbelief is structural support. The more you insist the rally is fake, the more your side hoards ammunition that converts into buys exactly where you swear it will reverse. The market hears your sermon and collects collateral. Stops are collateral. Margin is collateral. Ego is collateral. When the tape comes for repayment, you settle in market orders. You call it manipulation. I call it settlement, paid with your certainty. So where does that leave your cherished model? Supply and demand exist, but not as museum exhibits. They exist as prints, as cancels, as pulls, as stops that flip, as resting size that evaporates on contact. Your summary treated the move like a clean reaction to a tidy shift in curves. The real reaction is messier. Direct crowd aggression plus forced short covering forms a compound impulse that feeds on itself until the nearest pocket of ready fuel is gone. You wrote those ingredients yourself. You just did not like reading them back when the candle made the script obvious. And if the tape keeps turning your conviction into gasoline, where exactly do you plan to hide when the next leg needs a donor and your position is already lined up at the altar? Let's cut into the tendon you keep protecting with slogans. Your summary turns demand into a polite cloud that drifts higher and lifts price like a balloon. That dodge is how traders get wrecked on a pump and dump while swearing the chart violated economics. Price did not violate anything. Your framework did. You kept theory where the tape needed mechanics. The real driver inside your own words is not more demand as a vibe. It is specific orders crossing the spread and specific stops detonating into buys because too high felt like wisdom until the fill hit at a worse level. Here is the systemic mistake you keep feeding. You treat stops as exits instead of entries. When you short and place a stop, you did not write a diary note. You armed a conditional buy. That buy sits in the market's pantry, waiting to be cooked the moment price tags it. Multiply that by a crowd repeating the same conviction, and you built a shelf of fuel stacked above obvious highs. Then you pretend the squeeze is an anomaly. Dude. You stocked the room with gasoline and left the match on the table. You also confuse visible supply with actual sell interest. A thick offer wall parades as weight until it gets touched and evaporates. And you call that increased supply. No, that is theater. The tape only respects orders that stay when hit. Pulls and cancels are non-events wrapped in bravado. Meanwhile, marketable buys keep printing. The tape counts prints. It does not count your opinion about how heavy the book looked 5 seconds ago. You want the book to be a promise. The book is a suggestion with a cancel button. Another rod in your reading. You separate crowd buying from short covering like they occur in different seasons. They braid in one sequence. Aggressive buys tick it up. Shorts flinch. Stops flip to buys. Price stretches. Late buyers chase. Offers pull. Shorts add out of ego. Risk snaps. Next, pocket blows. Repeat. That is not demand increased in a lecture hall sense. That is demand manufactured by both hope and pain, feeding on itself. Your model draws 2 curves and calls it a day. The tape draws a loop and keeps asking if you want to keep donating. You also drag the word expensive into every argument like it owes you rent. Expensive relative to what your anchor from a lower price or the pockets of forced buying stacked above. Too high is not analysis. It is the prelude to your stop converting into a market buy that pays up because you refuse to cut your losses hard when it still felt cheap to be wrong. The distance between where you declared too high and where you actually puked is the distance your equity keeps bleeding. And you keep pretending it is random. It is not random. It is the path of your own liquidation. Then there is time. The piece you flatten, you imagine instant balance. In reality, the move hunts pockets. The first pocket is the nearest cluster of stops. The next is the band where chasers from earlier tried to be clever with tight risk and get run over. Liquidity is not evenly spread. It is clumped. Price moves by eating clumps. Your curves do not map clumps. And that is why the candle keeps writing lines your story cannot explain. Worst of all, you try to argue that a rally doesn't count if shorts are covering. That is denial wearing a tie. The print does not tag motives. It tags volume. Covering is buying. Buying lifts price. Calling it just covering is the same as saying just demand, which is exactly what your own summary started with while pretending it was different. You cannot have it both ways. Either the print matters or your adjectives do. The market has already picked the winner. So stare at the core again. Price climbs on direct crowd aggression and on shorts converting stubborn certainty into compulsory buys. If you still cling to the museum curves, ask yourself this with a straight face. when your model cannot account for the very orders your platform executed on your behalf. What else inside that model is quietly sharpening the knife for the next squeeze? Line up your museum sketch next to the tape, and the contrast stings. The naive side paints supply and demand as smooth, well-behaved curves that glide into a tidy intersection. The harsh side prints jagged bursts where urgency tramples theory. Your summary lives on the left wall, with polite arrows. Demand shifts right, price goes up. Supply shifts right, price goes down. The tape lives on the right wall, with footprints. Market buys cross the spread. Offers pull. Shorts detonate into buys. The candle lunges. One is a classroom promise. The other is your equity report, after you got wrecked and wondered why a simple model did not protect you. Start with that word you leaned on, demand. In the sketch, demand grows like a fog. In reality, demand shows up as traders paying worse prices on purpose. You called that more demand, as if it were a gentle tide rising. It is not a tide. It is a shove. It is aggression, choosing speed over comfort. Each push thins local liquidity, and each thinning makes the next push more expensive for anyone stuck on the wrong side. That is the mechanism your neat curve refuses to confess. Because confessing means admitting that too high shorts are not independent observers, they are tinder stacked under the move. Now, flip to supply. You wrote as if more supply reliably weighs price down. In the sketch, it does. On the tape, it often evaporates. Visible offers pose as weight until they are touched and vanish in a blink. That is not supply. That is theater. Supply that matters stays when hit. The rest is noise wearing a heavy coat. You leaned on how full the book looked. The tape leaned on what actually printed. It did not care how brave the wall felt 5 seconds ago. It cared that crowd buys kept stepping forward and your weight kept canceling like a bluff caught on camera. Hidden corner number 1. Your own logic turns shorts into latent buyers. You admitted that squeezes happen when short sellers get cut because price looked too high. That admission wrecks the museum split. Those stops are not moral judgments. They are conditional buys. When they fire, they print as demand. The same tape category as the crowd chaser. 2 sources. 1 effect. Your model pretends they are separate universes. The candle treats them as one stream pouring through the same funnel. Hidden corner number 2. Clustering. The sketch assumes evenly spread intentions. The tape feasts on clumps. 2 high sermons push traders to the same short zones with the same tight stops in the same obvious bands. That uniformity is a gift to the move you oppose. Price raids the first pocket, snaps the first band, inhales the second, and your disbelief keeps donating. Meanwhile, your commentary insists that increased supply should pull price down. Should, according to who, the curve, or the queue of forced buys you helped build above the highs. Hidden corner number 3. Motives do not tag the print. You keep trying to divide real buying from just covering, as if the chart annotates intentions. It does not. It records buys. Covering buys are still buys. The move does not ask whether hope or pain pressed the button. It only amplifies the pressure that actually crossed. Calling it just covering while conceding that price lifted on those prints is the same as saying just demand. Your own sentence boxed you in. You are arguing with your echo. There is also path dependence you refuse to face. The sketch implies reversible grace. Move the curve back. Price drifts back. The tape record sequences that leave scars. Missed exits. Delayed recognition. Canceled offers. Triggered stops. Each event changes what is available for the next event. By the time you admit defeat, the path has already shifted, and your late capitulation adds one more thrust. You will call that manipulation. The tape will call it settlement, funded by the story you guarded. So, hold your summary up to the light. You said price rises on crowd buys. True. You said price also rises because shorts get cut for thinking it is too high. Also true. The comparison you avoided is the one that matters. The sketch talks about balance as if it were ordained. The tape hunts fuel, because that is what your orders turned it into. The harsh reality is that your certainty about too high packs the shelves with compulsory buys above you. And your faith in more supply leans on placeholders that evaporate when touched. If that is the battlefield, what do you think happens the next time your comfort maps a stop, right where the market has been eating for breakfast? Here's the escape hatch you keep pretending doesn't exist. Stop arguing with curves and start thinking in flows. Not a sermon, just a switch. Your own text already hands you the pieces crowd buys that step forward, and shorts that convert disbelief into compulsory buys. A cleaner lens treats those as one river with two tributaries. Voluntary demand. Involuntary demand. Same print. You wanted a metaphysics debate about value. The tape wanted to know who is hitting and who is getting hit. Call it inventory thinking. Not inventory as in boxes on shelves. Inventory as in orders poised to convert. Aggressive buyers are obvious inventory. They click, they cross, they print. Shorts with clustered stops are shadow inventory. Their buttons get pressed by price. But the result is identical, a buy that lifts the next tick. Through that lens, too high isn't analysis. It's a label glued to a pallet of future buys, stacked right above the highs. The crowd keeps adding pallets because agreement feels safe. Price raids the stack because conversion is guaranteed. That's not destiny. That's arithmetic in a hallway with the lights on. Then there's supply as you framed it. In the sketch, more supply should weigh price. In the tape, supply earns respect only when it stands still while being hit. Offers that vanish are not supply. They are costume changes. A better read is to treat real supply as a behavior stay and transact, not flash and disappear. If it stays, it absorbs. If it doesn't, it lubricates the path for the next shove. Your summary never said that out loud, but it implies it every time. You admit a squeeze accelerates when offers pull and shorts pop. Path matters. Your version says price responds to shifts as if the board resets each tick. The river view says sequence leaves bruises. Once the first pocket of stops fires, the next pocket sits closer, not farther. Once offers pull, follow through faces less friction, not more. Once disbelief hardens, fresh shorts reload in the same zones, not smarter ones. The move feeds itself until the ready barrel's empty. The moment that clicks, unfair gets replaced by predictable given the inventory on deck. And those aren't just different words. They are different nerves. There's a sanity check baked into your own claim. If price can rise because shorts are covering, the covering itself is demand on the tape. That folds directly into the river view. The crowd's chase and the short's capitulation are not competing explanations. They are stacked contributors. One flow answers who wants in. The other answers who is forced in. And the candle doesn't separate them with a conscience. It merges them and steps higher until the nearest pool is gone. The denial dies when the print tells you it never cared why the buy existed, only that it existed. Risk language also shifts under this lens. Expensive stops being a verdict and turns into a map of where stops cluster. The word itself becomes a signal every time you say it with conviction. Picture another drip into the pool above you. Not a motivational poster. Not toxic positivity. Just cause and effect. The stronger the chorus of too high. The thicker the shelf of latent buys. The easier the raid when momentum sniffs it. That's not romantic. That's a shopping list the market keeps in plain sight. What starts working is humility toward prints and hostility toward placeholders. Treat anything that cancels on touch as theater. Treat anything that persists under fire as friction. Treat your own stop as a future buy with a neon sign, not as a private thought. None of that requires worshiping a new idol. It just requires reading your own sentence without the sugar. Price rises on crowd aggression and on shorts turned into buyers. If both are true, then the only thing left is to decide which pockets are nearest and which belief is volunteering to pay for the next inch. So stand on this alternative perspective and look back at the sketch you kept safe on the wall. The curves were never the enemy. The story you told about them was, you can keep polishing the museum piece. Or you can acknowledge the river that already soaked your shoes, direct buys, pushing, forced buys, detonating, offers ducking, pockets clustering, path remembering. If that is the landscape, what happens the moment the river pauses? And the same crowd that chased higher now discovers where the compulsory cells are hiding? Tie it together without romance. Your own lines already drew the map. Price rises on direct crowd buying. And price rises when shorts who swore it was too high get sliced and flipped into buyers. Two tributaries. One river. The market is not reading a lecture. It is reading the tape. The tape does not grade beliefs. It tallies prints. When you peel away the museum gloss, the mechanism you described stops being mystical and turns into plumbing. You can actually see voluntary buys plus compulsory buys. Offers that either absorb or vanish. Pockets that either feed or starve the move. And a path that remembers where pain was left hanging. That is the harmony. If you want to call it that, curves as summary, not as cause. The curve tells a bedtime story about balance. The tape tells you who crossed the spread and who got dragged across it. Your clause about shorts being forced out is not a footnote. It is the hinge. Stops are entries. Pride writes them. Probability caches them. Once that sinks in, the old split pure demand versus pure supply stops being a moral debate and becomes a simple inventory question. Where are the latent buys stacked? And how close is the next shelf? Notice how this reframing strips your favorite alibis. Too high becomes code for a cluster of stops is sitting right above my head. More supply becomes meaningful only if it stays when punched. Weight that disappears is not weight. It is lubricant. A wall that stands and transacts is friction. A wall that flinches is an accelerant. The difference is not philosophical. It is mechanical. You already admitted it when you wrote that short sellers get cut and feed the rally. That one sentence exposes the whole machine. You were watching balance beams. The market was turning your certainty into gasoline. There is also a quiet mercy hidden in the brutality. Once you accept that the print does not tag motives, the shame drops out of the picture. A cover is a buy. For mine little taked, a chase is a buy. The chart does not care whether you arrived in hope or in pain. It only cares that you added thrust. That removes the fake hierarchy where real demand should count more than just covering. The move is agnostic. Your equity is not. The sooner your language stops pretending otherwise, the sooner the candles stop looking like personal insults and start looking like settlements you authored in advance. Then the symmetry from the question I left hanging snaps into focus. If clustered stops above, feed a rally. Clustered stops below, feed the other side. Inventory cuts both ways. The same certainty that stacks shorts on the way up stacks longs on the way down. Your summary never said the word capitulation, but it lives in the spaces between your sentences. The tape hunts fuel, not fairness. If there is a pocket, it will get tested. If there is a shelf, it will get rated. If there is a chorus chanting too high or too low, it will build a ladder for the next leg to climb or a trapdoor for the next leg to fall through. That is not cynicism. That is continuity. So the harmonized red is boring in the best way. Price does not float on curves. It runs on flows. Direct buying pushes. Forced buying amplifies. Offers that cancel mid-impact do not push back. They pave the road. Clusters are not trivia. They are the itinerary. Time does not reset each tick. It carves memory into the path. You wrote the ingredients yourself and then tried to keep them in separate jars. The tape shook the shelf and poured them into the same vessel. The next time you want to call a rally fake, remember your own sentence. Shorts thought it was too high, got chopped, and became buyers. The word fake dies the moment that line is honest. Sharp note to end on, the candle is not arguing with your worldview. It is settling your positions. You can keep calling a squeeze unfair while your stop inks the buy that pushes it farther. Or you can read your own text without anesthesia and finally see what the tape has been saying in plain English the whole time. Crowd aggression plus short stop fuel. Braided, layered, relentless until the nearest pocket is dry. If that stung, good. Pain focuses. And if it focused you, share this with the buddy who still thinks curves trade themselves. And hit subscribe to Flow State Trading so you do not miss the next razor edge breakdown that tells you exactly where your certainty keeps paying the bill.